mean, maybe if the microphone's not close to him.
Yeah, I'll hog it the entire time. You are actively trying not to make noises. I know you are.
So funny.
All right. I guess Stuart's just going to have ice cream while we do this. Here's your mic.
I'm going to turn into players.
Oh, I got a question.
Yeah, you cannot do that with your mouth full.
Why not? It's part of the experience.
Well, that's true.
You could make it like ASMR.
Welcome to tonight's ASMR episode with Earth to Krissy. People are going to be like, what is this chicken chew?
They start...
Some people are into
Tonight's
it.
feature is Stuart
eating...
noshing on ice
that?
cream. Sprinkled animal cookie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I've never heard of this brand, Red Button. It's really cute. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Unless you want to. Do you want to lead us in? No, okay, you're preoccupied. All right, friends, we're back again for another ramble. And as you can already tell, it's starting out in fine fashion. Of course, we have no plan, but it's absolutely okay because Stuart and I are really, really excited to record this episode because we have our first ever guest on the podcast. And I just knew it was going to be you from the beginning. Like, if there was anybody that was going to be on the podcast as a guest for the first time, it was probably going to be you. So I would like everybody to, I'd say give a warm welcome, but, clap your hands wherever you are. Thank you, Stuart. And welcome Krissy, aka Earth to Krissy. How are you?
Hi, guys. Thank you. I'm good.
I'm really excited about this, just because I feel like when we came up with the idea for Maybe We're Just Rambling, obviously, for the most part, it's just because we have unstructured conversations that go in a bunch of different directions, and we have a really hard time staying on topic. But at the same time, rambling is also, it has a little bit of like a nomadic interpretation too, and my idea, and I think Stuart's idea behind Maybe We're Just Rambling, was also just about like finding your path and kind of going your own way and doing your own thing. And I feel like you are very much doing that in a really unique way. And it's been cool to see your progression over the years since we've known you. So I think to kind of get this thing started off, why don't you kind of introduce yourself and tell everybody just a little bit about yourself, maybe like where we met and what got you into this lifestyle and what you're doing now. Just a little bit.
Okay. So, first off, let's bring it back to the podcast. I think last year when we met up, Rebecca was already doing YouTube, and she was like, if you do YouTube, I would totally watch your YouTube. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
They had mentioned podcasts. I'm like, if you guys do a podcast, I'll be, like, so on board. So I've listened to, like, all of them. So it's been awesome to, like, be on it and also be, like, your first guest. So that's really special. And I'll kind of swing back around to a little bit of that. But we met, years ago. How many, in 2014?
Let's see.
14 into 2016?
Yeah, I got to Guantanamo Bay in 2014. I think you were there a little bit before me.
And I got there a little bit after.
Yeah. So I was the first one there.
You're the OG.
So what, 8 years? And probably her.
I don't like that number. That
Yikes.
makes me feel, that seems old.
That's almost a decade.
That's crazy.
Woohoo.
But I will say, I feel like, Gitmo was so small, and so we were all stationed together, but I never worked with you guys, and we're kind of on our own separate things. So I feel like, everyone was friends there, but it was kind of like we had our own thing going.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like once we left, and I really kind of shifted my life, and I feel like found who I was a little bit more and felt more confident in the changes I was making in life, is kind of when me and Rebecca really connected over social media. And that is one thing I love about social media. I remember too messaging you because I went to my first crystal shop, and you had been talking about it, and I thought about this the other day, and I was laughing to myself, and I asked you something about the crystals because you were talking about yours, and I was like, is the bigger crystal mean it has more
Yeah,
energy?
I remember that.
Yeah, and then you explained it, and I was like, oh my gosh, she explained it in such a normal way without making me feel silly. But I think that was when we were both like, whoa, we like the same things.
Uh-huh.
Hold on. Crystals have energy. They're just rocks.
Now. There's an energy to everything.
I think I just upset the majority.
That's a topic for a different time. But that's so funny. I remember that.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Wow.
So then I feel like we've just stayed in good contact over the years. And so, actually, something you posted, it was right when COVID happened, and you posted about your guys' RV.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, like, messaging you, and I was so intrigued. And I was at my parents' house, like, COVID was happening. I had to, like, leave the city. And then you were like, yeah, we're going to be in it full time. And I had, like, a light bulb moment go off, and I was so intrigued, and I was up to like 4 a.m. on the internet looking at all the RVs.
How did we not hear this story?
I've heard this story.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah. Oh, you have. Okay,
No.
so I'll go into the details. And so I was up all night like researching. I mean, I was going from different types of RVs and this and that. And I think you saying you guys were doing it full time, because I was full time in school, and every break I got from school, I was planning out like vacations and travels I wanted to do, and I had them planned for months. And then when it came down to it, I could not afford the like hotel, the rental car, all this and that, and it was like my time was crunched. And so when I saw people kind of getting RVs and rigs, I was interested in that. But then once you said it was full time, I'm like, oh, this could like make sense.
It's an option.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like the school I was going for was so I could work remote, and so that got me. You guys were without even knowing it, you guys were the biggest inspiration for me to get into this lifestyle. I mean, and it took me like a little bit of a rocky start to get to where I am now.
That's been a journey.
Yeah, a little trial and error with a different rig that was ancient
and leaking from every pore.
Yes, but I will say I made a good turn. That was a good learning experience. So I bought a really old, not really old, but 88 Class C motorhome. I am embarrassed to say this, but I didn't test drive it before I bought it. And I just swooped it up because they were going like hotcakes, and it was a nightmare, but it was a good experience. I, made it look nice inside, and then kind of when it was all fully mechanically sound, just threw it up on the internet to see if it would sell, and it sold within days. But that, I'm thankful for that, because that led me to being in the bus now and having a sound vehicle. But yeah, so we met years ago and then kind of stayed somewhat in contact. And then last summer, we had kind of like, we were pretty much saying we hope we could meet up because we were both traveling. And then I ended up in a city I didn't really plan on being one morning. And randomly, I finally got a little bit of service, and I got your guys' message. And we were, minutes from each other.
It was so weird how it all worked out, because we had zero timeline last summer with any of our destinations or anything. Like, we really were flying by the seat of our pants. So the odds that we ended up in the same place at the exact same time was just bizarre. And I remember looking at your stories, and I was like, holy cow, she's in South Dakota. And then I was like, where are you staying tonight? And you're like, I don't know. And I was like, there's typical? Room next to us.
Yeah.
Is that typical Krissy?
Yes.
So, yeah, that was the first time we like linked up on the road. And I feel like that really deepened our, like, all of ours friendship quite a lot, because it was like we came together over something common, which is like travel, and we speak the same, like, you meet people throughout your life who are doing similar things to what you're doing, and you kind of speak the same language, and you can trade tips and tricks, and it just all worked out perfectly. And it was like, this is really, really rad, because it was the first time we'd ever met up with anybody on the road, really. Like, there had been times when like our paths might have crossed with someone that we knew, but like not like that, So that was really, really cool. So why don't you kind of get into the rig that you have now, like the process that you went into to find it, why you chose what you did, and like the evolution that it's gone through.
Okay.
It's a good question.
That is a good question, and I feel like I could talk about it for an hour, just because I feel like it was a good learning experience, and it's like anyone that was in my position, I just want to give them my advice, because my background had, besides from making the RV look cute, I didn't really do anything with power tools, really. I think I bought a jigsaw for it, and I remember being like, is a jigsaw something that can cut in a circle? Like, I had no idea. And so I wanted a rig that I could just hit the road and be comfortable, and my 2 dogs were coming, and they were kind of the main concern, just because of I have a Frenchie, and she can be a little, I have to be careful with like temperature and heat with her and whatnot. So my biggest concern was something that we could fit in, but also something that I felt comfortable driving, and I looked at all different types of things and kind of weighed out the pros and cons, and I watched, I mean, millions of hours of YouTube videos of just tours and people's opinions and whatnot. Well, I originally, you know, the vans were the biggest thing, and so I looked into those and realized that would be an investment that kind of defeated the purpose. I'd have to pay a lot monthly for it, and I was looking to save money by doing this. And so I was mostly looking at travel trailers and RVs, and during this time they were just going so quick, and I couldn't find one that I completely loved the layout, and so I knew there would be little things I wanted to change up, and plus RVs are like not pretty inside. Aesthetically they're an RV, and I knew I was going to be painting and making it my own, so it's hard for me to pay for a new nice one when I knew I was going to be like redoing everything. Well, randomly one night, middle of the night, I found this guy was selling a converted short bus. It was a 4-window bus, and it was kind of in my price range, and so that I messaged him, you know, kind of talked to him, and he was somewhere close to where I was living at the time, and it was nothing to go and meet him. So that night I did tons of research on YouTube about school buses, and everything I was finding was the huge 40-foot school buses, and then people building them out themselves, and I wanted no part of that. So the fact that this was already built out, I was intrigued with, and it had everything I wanted. It had a toilet, an outdoor shower, a rooftop deck, solar. I mean, it was fully set up, and so I was like, well, I've never even been in a small school bus, and I haven't been in a school bus since middle school, so I'll at least check it out. And I really didn't think I was going to like it too much because it just wasn't that popular at the time. It was just kind of different. And so I went and looked at it, and the guy was just super great and just a really genuine person, him and his wife, and I really liked his bus. And while I was there, I'm like, I'm totally going to buy this, but I also need to, like, play the front of, like, maybe. So I drove it and everything, and the problem was, this is a personal problem, but the way he had everything on the inside was definitely by a man who didn't care about aesthetics. And I was looking at this as being like, this is going to be my tiny home, like this is going to be my couple year plan in the future, and I want it to feel like mine. And so I was kind of thinking, if I did get it, it has all the bones that I need, but I would still be doing so much work to make it feel like my own, and I wasn't sure if that was worth it. And when I was leaving, he had mentioned that he was going to his dad's house in a couple hours, and that his dad had been buying, they worked for a church, and his dad had been buying school buses from the school district and selling to churches and like daycares and whatnot, and they fostered kids, and so so they like were really doing like good work. And when he said that, I'm like, oh, I don't care about an empty school, like I have no idea how to build anything. So I had left, and I went 2 miles down the road, and I was at the gas station. I opened up Facebook Marketplace, and his dad's buses were the first things popping up.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then I was and they weren't just, he was taking the seats out and painting them white and making them road legal, and
blank slate, basically.
Yes, and they were in my price range, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So I messaged his dad. I'm like, I just met with your son, like I'd love to meet you. So I think I went a couple days later, and the bus I originally went to look at, and I knew, like, when I got there, I was like, I'm going to take this thing home. Like, I know, like, I did more research. I'm like, this is going to be a fun project, and I'll take it step by step. And I kind of changed my mindset around from, like, hitting the road, like, ASAP to kind of building it out and, like, I mean, somewhat taking my time. I'm not very patient, but so I told his dad what I planned on doing, and he was fully behind it and thought it was like a really cool thing, and alternate living he was really, you know, interested in, pushed his kids to do. And so he showed me a bus that was kind of perfect for what I wanted to do with the doors and the flat floor and stuff. So that's how I landed on the bus. And then from there, it was a lot of just YouTube and learning, and I mean, it was the best learning experience I think I've ever had, especially with, I mean, being in the Navy and just life experiences. And it's like something I'm most proud of, but it's also one of those things where I do see all of the little errors myself, so it's bittersweet. But I do love knowing, like, I learned so many life skills, and in the future that's going to help me out with, you know, 100%. Wherever my path takes me.
So what, like, give us the quick specs. What exactly is your bus?
So it's a 2009 GMC Duramax. It's a 5-window short bus. and it does have wheelchair accessibility prior, so it has a second door at the foot of my bed, and that was what I really kind of dreamt of, is being able to be laying in bed and have that door open and like see the views. And every time I'm in a spot where I do that, I'm just like, I can't believe this is my life. Like, I dreamt of this, like I manifested it, and I mean, I put that like on a pedestal, and I finally achieved that, and that's like a really good feeling.
Yeah, I understand exactly how you feel, because we've kind of had the same moments ourselves throughout like the last probably year and a half, really, since we shook up our paradigm and changed up the way that we were doing things. And yeah, it's like when you have a conversation with somebody, or you think to yourself, how cool would it be if we could just do fill in the blank, or wouldn't it be amazing if we were able to go, you know, wherever, and then you make that happen, or it's almost like you like will it into existence. It's such a cool feeling, and I completely understand that.
Yeah, I think for us it was completely making our own schedule last summer. Completely being able to just sit somewhere for an extended period of time and just completely decide what we wanted to do, have no structure, and have to completely redesign and evolve things for ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think, like, hindsight, looking back over the last, you know, couple of decades or whatever, could you have ever seen yourself doing something like this? Do you think, like, there was kind of a chance that it would kind of go this way, or like what, like, do you ever have that kind of unreal moment where you're like, whoa, what am I doing, or not?
I think years prior I didn't realize that this was really even an option. I mean, I think I saw a little bit of van life on like Pinterest, but it was like old school vans in like Europe or something, where it was a little bit more normal. But I did always know I wasn't going to be completely rooted in one place for a while, and so from the beginning, like, I was looking for the types of jobs that I could work remote, and I wanted flexibility in my life no matter what. That was kind of my main concern. And then, yeah, up until like recent of getting the bus and stuff, once I realized like people were doing it and it was doable, and it wasn't, you know, it was something people my age and kind of in my situation. And, you know, like, especially you guys inspired me to do it, and kind of gave me that light bulb moment of, you don't have to be, like, retired or super rich to do this. And so other people's stories really inspired me. But I do feel like it makes sense now. Like, I'm so, like, I feel like as soon as I had that, like, moment of, oh, I really want to do that, like, I was willing to do anything to make it happen. And I think that's kind of the same with you guys. It's like, we'll have these moments where we're like, oh my gosh, this is our life, and, like, we made this happen. But we, like, worked hard for it, and it did just fall in our laps, you know?
100%.
We set up our life for it, and I think that's what makes it feel even more special, is I didn't just, like, stumble upon it and it kind of happened. Like, every choice I made, every hard choice was to make this happen. And so it was very, very intentional, and that makes it feel even, like, more fulfilling.
So, I know that if I were listening, I'd be wondering at this point, like, so what do you do, and, like, what's your plan for, like, the future, and, like,
what's your story?
Well, we kind of already got, like, a background.
What's your story going forward?
Yeah.
With this? How are you using this to live your life?
Yeah, exactly.
When people are like, what's your 5-year plan? I'm like, do not ask me that, because I've learned that my 5-year plans changed quite drastically. But, I mean, I do have a, like, goal and plan for the future. But, so I was traveling on and off for the past year because I was still finishing up, you know, like, my last year of school. And so it felt very, I guess, part-time, and now it feels very full-time. And that's also changed my perspective a little bit, as far as, like, not rushing around, and, like, being able to, you know, choose where you want to go. And sometimes it's hard because you have so many options. It's hard to, like, make a solid, concrete option. I mean, I'll wake up one morning and completely change my mind and go somewhere different. But my plan moving forward is to be in the bus for a couple of years. I mean, until I don't enjoy it anymore, and I feel like I'm only enjoying it more and more. So who knows? But my plan is definitely to upgrade, but to something small. Like, I don't see myself living in a huge, big home. I mean, I want to say ever, but who knows? But my plan is definitely some type of tiny home. And I would like it, you know, I'd like a plot of land with a tiny home, but I also want a rig to be able to travel in still. So that's kind of what I plan in the few years forward, is to have a little bit of like a home base and some stability, but to be able to like get up and go whenever I get that urge.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And if anything, I mean, what you've managed to accomplish so far should like prove to you that if that's something that you want, you can make it happen. Like it will happen some way. Like Stuart and I are really fond of saying that we put ourselves in the way of good things happening.
Yeah.
And you just kind of, you make that like a focus, and you don't obsess over it to the exclusion of all else, but it's there. And something else that we were talking about kind of recently, one thing that's been cool about working here and meeting people from all over the country, is that you meet people who have done all different kinds of things, and no one's life story looks exactly the same, and you just never know what the future is going to hold. And in a more morbid sense, I'm really fond of saying, like, you know, we could drop dead tomorrow. And so in my mind, it's like, are my basic needs being met now? Like, do I have a roof over my head? Do I have food in the fridge? Do I have security and safety? If all of those things are yes, then it really isn't super important what you do in 5 years, you know, because none of us might be here, but we're happy now and we're living a good life. And that's not to say not to have goals. Like that's I think that's a little bit too far. I think you have to have goals and things to work towards because it gives you purpose, but not to the point that it like becomes all that you obsess over and you don't get to enjoy the now. And that's something I really love about this life, is that I feel like we get to enjoy the now so much more, you know?
Totally.
Yeah, a big part of what I think makes it a really cool experience being able to be nomadic in a way. We have a definition and you have a definition, and then like people like our parents or older generations have a definition of reckless, and we're able to redefine reckless, because to me what we're doing is not reckless, but to a lot of people it is. And
that's I'm
really
sure
funny.
My parents think I'm so, I mean, they always thought I was reckless, but
and we were crazy for getting out of the Navy.
So now we're like
we jumped over the cliff.
But it's crazy because, and I love the cliff analogy too, because it's like you think about taking that leap, and thinking about it is so scary, and you think about it and you think about it, because I can still remember the mindset back before we got the RV, and like the very idea was like we won't have a home, like what do you mean? And then you start doing it, and it's not a big deal, you know? Like, you just...
This is your home.
And you take that step, and you jump off the cliff, so to speak, and it's... There's just... The next step is there waiting for you. And I just think it's been a really good lesson for us, and I bet you'd probably agree, that you don't have to have these, like, hard and fast, like, oh, in a year I'm going to do this, and in 5 years I'm going to be here, and in 10 years I'm going to do that. Like, it's kind of pointless.
Exactly. And that's, like... I mean... I did have, like previous, way before the buses, like I had these goals and these plans, and that's what I was working towards, but I was kind of felt so concrete in them, and then all of a sudden when life happens and things change, it's kind of a big reality check that you have no idea what's going to happen in the future, and so you kind of need to work towards your goals, but be flexible about it and be like open. And I think that's what I wasn't in the past, and that is how I feel now. Is I almost feel so stable being on the road and in the bus, because no matter what happens, I know I have a home.
100%.
And that's a good feeling, because I mean I have never owned a house and a mortgage. I've always rented and moved from place to place, and that felt kind of unstable and like really unsure. Especially like searching for an apartment is the most like
it's awful,
stressful thing.
I hate it.
Yeah, and I don't want to do that ever again. And so knowing I always have like a backup and something. I mean, at first I was looking at the bus as like my backup plan for now. Like I can always go into if I need to, and now like that is my plan A. It just feels nice, like, if I don't want to be in a certain area, I get to move. And it's really freeing feeling. And I feel like it almost feels like the least reckless thing I've ever done.
I know, isn't
which
that
is so funny. Yeah.
So you've kind of referenced a couple of times, like, kind of like, I don't think you expressly said it, but kind of like finding yourself. Do you kind of, I don't want to like make you overexpose yourself, but would you want to talk a little bit about maybe a couple of the things that happened and kind of how you found yourself maybe a little bit like high and dry, or not living the life that you thought you were going to be living, and how it's all kind of worked out for the better? Because I think people are so terrified by change.
I think I've always liked change, and I tend to get bored with things. But yeah, I think I'm from a really small town, and there's a certain way to do things, and you know, I was in a serious relationship and I thought I was going to be with that person for the rest of my life. You know, we were married, and that ended, and it ended in a really, I'm very fortunate because it ended in a really, I wouldn't say good way. I mean, no, divorce is amazing, but ended in a beautiful way that it led us both to grow and kind of do what we needed to do in our separate ways, but still, like, respect each other and, like, think each other like good people. And so that, I think, is what really kind of had me blossom, like, on my own. Like, I was totally making the changes in, like, dependently on, like, by myself, and not saying that the divorce is what, like, changed my whole life, because I think I'd be the same person I am now whether I was married to someone or not.
Right.
I think, but it's given me a really good chance to make decisions fully for my own life. And I mean, that was a while ago, and so what I'm doing now doesn't really have a whole lot to do with that. But I think it's kind of led me, it gave me life lessons, and after that is, every step after that has led me to where I am, and they're all by my own experiences and choices and decisions. And so I think what a big thing, though, that did kind of lead me to this lifestyle is just living more simply, for one, and two, kind of just living again, like, doing things against, like, social norms and living alternative ways. And that's, like, something I'm, like, super into, and it's not, like, anti-normalism, which what is, you know, normal, but it's more of knowing that I never really wanted the big house or the white picket fence, and I never wanted to stay in, like, one city for the rest of my life, and I wanted the freedom to, like, move around, and now I get to do it on a whole different level. And it's almost like everything in my bus is really all I need, and I mean, I could live with less, you know? I have all my toys and all my things, but knowing that you don't need all this extra stuff, and it almost feels like extra baggage at this point. So I definitely feel like my whole perception with just, like, health and simple living and just kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, but, like, kind of more of a natural approach to things is, like, a major...
More in tune.
Yes, and just, like, being in tune to yourself, and, like, you know, nature's a big part of it. And that's, like, the great thing is, like, I live in the bus, but a lot of my time is spent outside of the bus. But yeah, that's, like, what really is a big part of it.
I like that a lot, and I think that's so true. And I think anybody who's doing this kind of thing, we all kind of have a moment, whether or not we talk about it outwardly, a moment where we realized, like, I don't want to live X lifestyle, or I am not going to do X thing. It's like, I'm going to prioritize happiness over anything else.
Yeah, totally.
And I think for some people that can kind of sound like we're kind of eschewing, like, responsibility or something like that, but it's not that. It's like the whole idea that you can't pour from an empty glass, you know?
Yeah, okay. I see what you're saying. Kind of what Stuart was talking about earlier is everything I'm doing right now is, like, I think it's almost more responsible than I've ever been. It's prioritizing my happiness now. Like, everything I'm doing is to make myself happy now. And, I mean, that's building, like, towards the future, but think about how much you're expanding, like, your skill set, and, like, your perception of the world and everything. I mean, you are going to be so much more capable than you would have been if you had just, like, stayed in Detroit and done the typical thing. Totally.
You know?
Yeah, and that goes for both of us. Like, if we all three were not doing this, our life 5 or 10 years from now would be so different than what it's going to be, in, like, such a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really think this leads to a really well-rounded life.
Yeah.
And not just being stuck with blinders on doing the one thing, you know, waking up, getting the kids ready, taking them to school, going to work, getting through your day, picking the kids up, going home, getting dinner done, dishes, this and that.
Not to say that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic life. But sometimes I think that can be a little bit of a blinder, in that you're not actually exposing yourself to all that you would be able to absorb. And so we're able to basically open our lens a little bit and absorb a whole lot of things.
So in keeping with all that and, like, skills and everything like that, do you want to talk about some of the things, like some of the features of your bus and how you've kind of, like, learned about them?
Yeah. So my bus was kind of built in 2 phases, and majority of it was finished this time last year. But I mean, I did the plumbing, the electrical. I built, you know, like my bed, and I did use like pre-made cabinets, which I'm grateful for because I don't think I have the patience to make good cabinets. I like designing and creating. I mean, that is my background, is, you know, designing. So I like doing that. But when it comes down to like the small details, so yeah, it's like when it's time for me, and it also was, it really made you kind of think outside the box too. It's like before I put my walls or my like cabinets in, I have to run my wires, and then I was like, well, I better figure out how to do electricity, and that is a big part of it. Is like I had someone plan that was going to do the electricity for me, and then when I needed it done, they weren't really free, and they were more of like, I will teach you, and I was just like, no, just get it done for me, like I want it done. And then when that kind of fell through, I taught myself through, I mean, the internet and YouTube, and just there's a huge amount of knowledge on the internet, and there's also bad advice too, so it's like filtering that all out. But just, I mean, I messed up my electrical a couple of times, and I figured it out. It's like, it was rough building the bus. It was not like the easiest thing to do, but it taught me so much. And if someone was there showing me, it would have went so much quicker. But it was like I had to learn on my own and like fix my mistakes, and that's a really actually awesome part of it. You know, and then it came to plumbing. It was like I bought all the things I was told to buy, and they ended up not working out, and I had to like, I mean, I went to Home Depot like a million times.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah. So that was just really awesome. So I, you know, it's got electrical. It's pretty simple. You know, it's just got a couple outlets, and my whole power system is run off a Goal Zero, which I'll be upgrading in the future, but that was like a good starting point to get me going. And so it's got that, it's got plumbing, it's got a full kitchen, composting toilet, which is like the best thing ever, I feel like. I mean,
we covered that in a
we all love our toilets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't just go, enjoy the go.
Yeah. The toilet gives you some freedom. And then there's, you know, solar on the roof, outdoor shower, which is mostly for like the dogs. Bodhi. Let's be real. Mostly Bodhi, because he's always in and out of the water. And then my rooftop deck. And that's like my most favorite thing.
The rooftop deck is so distinctive. I love it.
We'll have to, in the post for this, take some pictures and maybe do a little quick walk-in and panning of everything. That'll be cool.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll clean it first.
This is your warning.
This is your heads up. We're coming in.
Yeah, but the rooftop deck was like also when I, you know, got the bus, and that was like the major like idea I had in my head, and it finally took me a year to finally do it, because I kind of wanted someone else to do it because I wanted it done right, and then I finally took the initiative to do it myself, and I'm glad I did that. And it's one of those things too where I see the imperfections, but I'm like, I built this deck in less than 2 days, and if I can do it, anyone can do it. And so that's always like a fun talking point, and it's also something I get to share with so many people. Like half the time I've been on the deck, it's been filled with other people, and that's like fun. It's like a gathering place, you know. So yeah, I think that's the major key points of it.
The solar, the toilet. Yeah, those are like the big things, because that's what people wonder about. It's like, how do you have electricity? Can you charge your phone, and can you go to the bathroom?
Yeah, it's pretty much an RV in there. You know,
it
everything
really is.
You need. Someone told me, like, wow, you really know how to like rough it. I'm like, I am like I'm more than glammy. I got a tiny home on wheels. Like, I'm not roughing it.
I know. It's so funny how your perception of that changes. It's like we've talked about with like staying on public land and stuff. It's like when I first heard about it was like people just going out into the bush and staying somewhere on like public land. I was like, ew. That is so offensive.
Park in the middle of the woods or the middle of a prairie and just like look around and have nothing.
It's like, what?
How great does that sound?
But now it's like, oh, heck yeah. Like, let's go find some public land and be away from people. Like, that sounds amazing. And you have the best views for free. Like, it's just, And
there's so much of it, and there's so much different types of it, too. You're not just stuck with one type of landscape. And I told you guys, I'm like, there's so many times where I'm like, wait, how and why am I allowed to, like, stay here for free? Like, what? I always double check.
This land is your land. This land is my land.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Well, I think let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, we'll talk about some more stuff. We'll ramble some more.
Yes.
All right, we're back from that break. I stretched out. My knee is still sore, but we will prevail.
We went on that crazy hike.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sidebar before we get back to it. I know it seems like this is 10 seconds later in the podcast, but really there was a couple minutes, so we're kind of like breaking up our mental focus on it. Let's talk about what we did the other day.
Oh, God. Chrissy's face.
Okay, no. Just kidding, guys. That's a teaser. That's a teaser. That's a funny point to leave on.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, we're going to save that for the end?
Yeah. That's a funny point to leave on.
Okay, all right.
We left off with talking about you, your bus, how you are going forward. I had a question, though. What would be something like a pro or con to being in a van or a big bus that most people that don't do it wouldn't know?
Okay, that's a good question. So my first thought is, it is not. A couple of weeks ago I was like at the gas pump and this older gentleman was like, "You drive that all by yourself?" And I'm thinking, no, I have someone help me drive it. But he like meant well, and it's like driving it is honestly so easy. It's because my bus is, the front end is kind of like a van, but just a lot of extra stuff behind me.
Yeah, got a lot of junk in the trunk.
Yeah, I got a lot of junk in the trunk. She's thick back there.
Okay, we're PG, folks.
Yeah.
Just talking about
Bring
the
it back around.
the back of the bus.
Yeah. But it is easy to drive. Like, I don't feel like I'm driving some huge thing, and it's not like I have a trailer behind me. That's kind of different too. So it isn't that bad, and I do have like a backup camera that's on all the time that shows the back of my bus so I can see. I feel super comfortable driving the bus. Like even in cities, like I'm not like super stressed out. It's a lot more easier than you would think. But there is a lot of weight with it. And so like stopping or, like Stuart had to teach me how to like go down steep inclines like safely and not be on my brakes the whole time. But there will be people that will like pull out in front of me, and I'm always like, yo, I'm driving a little like a bus, like I cannot stop like other people. But so I think it is, that might sound a little contradicting, but it's not intimidating at all. And I do know like it's the same length as a big van, and but it has more living space. It's a little bit like wider, and so I think that's like the con of it is it's heavier. You can't like, it's not super like zippy, but I feel safe driving it, and I get so much more living space in the inside instead of like a van or something like that.
Yeah, I feel like it's really, really solid. Like if heaven forbid if somebody hit you in that, it's like it's metal, so you know.
So that's actually a huge con too. When I was doing my research, is they were made to keep children safe in accidents. So the structure is just so sound, and that makes me feel safe too.
Wait, that would be a
really
pro
good
then.
point.
Yeah, totally big pro.
Well,
Yeah.
you said con.
Oh yeah, no, pro.
Yeah, that's huge. So I think the last thing that I'll kind of ask you, and I think this is something that a lot of people would wonder about, is kind of how you afford and how you fund your travels now, and like what your plan is kind of going forward.
Yeah. So, working remote was always a big goal of mine before the bus. So right now my degree's in graphic design, and so I still have a semester left, but I'm already using my degree. I'm doing graphic design on the road, and I started my own design business, and that's growing, and that's kind of my main goal, is to be doing that, at more of a full-time rate. But I will say, because I think it's a little outside of the norm, I'd say, from what you normally hear, is I am still in debt, and so living this lifestyle is helping me get out of debt.
That's huge.
Yeah, and it's like living in your rig, the expense is so small. Granted, like fuel is expensive right now, but you get to control like how much you want to move around. So it's definitely getting me out of debt, and I'm working remote. I also am doing, YouTube and filming YouTube bus tours for someone else, and that's like a little bit of income, and still some income from the military, but it is definitely, working remote, and like you guys doing work camping, that's like something I'm interested in too, and so that's an experience I want to have, and just kind of figure out if that's something I like or not. 'Cause, some people will do it like once, I feel like, and then they like move on, and then some people really like it, and that's kind of all they do. So I have multiple small forms of income, and that's, just what is that's enough, that's working for me in my lifestyle. And it's kind of like, you get to, when you're living this lifestyle, you kind of get to choose your balance between, like, work and play.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a joke earlier, like, my play's a little high right now for, like, my work, but it's just, you know, like, an ebb and flow of your life and, like, the stages. And so, yeah, working remote, doing, you know, graphic design, and, I mean, I'm sure you guys can attest to this, but it's, like, random jobs come up that you never would have expected. And so, I'm just really key on, like, keeping everything open and keeping my options open.
And actually, it kind of comes back to what you were saying about this feeling super, super secure, is just that I've heard quite a few people say that it's a really good idea to kind of diversify your streams of income. Like, that's actually something you kind of want to seek to do. You don't want to have all of your eggs in one basket, because if something happens and you lose that revenue stream, like, what do you do?
Right.
Like, everything was hanging on that, and now you have nothing. So I actually think it's really, really smart to kind of break things up and have different options, because when one picks up, another one might fall off, or when that one falls off, the other one picks up. Like, it all ends up evening out just fine.
And that's kind of something I've been doing over the past few years anyways, kind of having multiple streams of income. And I didn't originally, a lot of people on the road, I think, kind of are having multiple streams, but I didn't really do it intentionally for, like, I mean, yes, for having backup, but I mostly did it because I have so many different interests. And I don't like knowing that something that I enjoy doing, like design, is my only form of making money, because then it doesn't feel fun anymore. So it's almost like doing some of that, and then doing some of this, and doing some of things that involve being out in nature and filming. Like, it almost doesn't feel like jobs. It feels like a part of your life and a part of your lifestyle.
You get to work to live instead of living to work.
Totally. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered a whole lot of the bus and a whole lot about you. I have just, like, one last question. It's just a raw question, and it doesn't really pertain to debt. Maybe it does, though, but I'll just go ahead and ask it. What's been the hardest part about having the bus?
The hardest part is, thankfully I have good people in my life to, like, ask for opinions and stuff. Even, I mean, I've hit up Stuart so many times from 2,000 miles away, and he's helped me. But if something goes wrong, like, mechanically, or, I don't know, with solar or anything with the bus, it's all on me to fix it. I don't have and I'm proud of being dependent and knowing I can make my own decisions, and pretty much, like, common sense and, like, getting my, like, problem solving. But it's not always easy, and it can be really stressful. And I think that's the biggest thing, is something goes wrong, it's not just me dealing with it in the bus. Like, I have to think of my dogs, and it's almost like children, you know, it's like they're your main priority. And so it's kind of like, if something goes wrong, it's all on me to figure it out and fix it. And then also, like, there's just things I'm like, I don't want to make silly mistakes with the bus, like go down a road I shouldn't, and then kick myself in the butt for it. So it's like, I think I'm kind of constantly, like, thinking ahead and kind of, like, having the, is this a good idea, or, like, is it worth the risk, or is it not?
You have to be your own adult.
Yeah, totally.
Well, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was a good answer, I think.
And I think something that I'd like to ask you, because I think this is something that a lot of, like, young women would wonder about, is there any kind of, like, piece of advice that you would give to a younger woman who, like, really, really, really wants to do something like this, and maybe there are people in her life who are trying to discourage her from it because they're telling her it's not safe, or that she needs to do something that's more dependable and predictable? Like, what would you tell them?
Just trust your gut instinct. I've had weird situations happen, but it's like I was able to get myself out of them quickly. But yeah, I mean, I feel more safe in the bus than I did in my apartment or my house that I was living in. I mean, there's many times where I've moved and been like, oh, it felt so good to move out of that place, or just not feeling completely comfortable and safe being stationary in a place. I mean, especially in Detroit, and I grew up in a small town, and I always felt safe. So not feeling safe, I've learned to, like, deal with, you know, but I definitely feel like trust your gut instinct, have have many options for defense, and only keep with you what you feel comfortable using. And I mean, there's tons of advice out there with weapons and this and that, and I don't think that's should be your main concern. It should just be, like, putting yourself in the best situations.
Right, you don't have to actually use them.
Yeah, and too, it's like, I hate that has to be such a topic of, like, feeling safe on the road as a female. It's really sad that it is what it is. But it's more of, like, not falling into that trap and that rabbit hole of being like, I am single on the road, being a female, and it's more of, like, taking pride in that you are doing it by yourself, and that's owning it, and just having the confidence in yourself to make safe decisions if something were to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's important, because I think it can be really easy for people, especially, people who mean well and they want the best for you, but they think, like, if you just do X, Y, and Z, you'll be safe. When in reality, safety is an illusion anyway.
Yeah.
And terrible things happen to people all kinds of places. And let's be real, like, you're a lot more likely, I mean, I can remember you telling me a story a couple years ago. You were a lot more likely to have something negative happen to you in Detroit than you are out in BFE public land.
And that's some of the main, and usually from the men in my life, the ones that, when they care about you, they're like, do you have this or that, or like, what are you doing to be safe? And I always can answer yes. I'm like doing, whatever that they're, and that gives them, I feel like, a little, like, sense of relief. But it's also like, if something were unsafe to happen, it's probably not really in my, I mean, granted, I can move and go where I want and make choices to feel safe, but people are going to do what they want to do anyway, like the bad people. And so it's just making sure that you're setting yourself up for the best, to be able to make the best choices in that situation. But I feel like if you ask most single, females on the road, they haven't had that many bad things happen. And I'm not saying it's because everyone's great out there, but it's because you make the choices to feel, if you don't feel safe somewhere, move, there's a lot to that.
Yeah, it's just like the bad things are the things that make headlines, not like the great things happening every day.
Right. I mean, I felt safe a million times compared to maybe the little 1% that I haven't. Yeah.
That's really sound advice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will, like, I think a biggest advice I can give to someone doing it is, for one, don't let other people make you feel scared of doing it. Use common sense, like, when you're out there, and do what you need to do to feel safe, whether you feel it's extra or not, but also tell people what you're doing, where you're going. I feel 10 times better now texting my mom, be like, I'm going on a 2-mile hike, and it should take this long. If I'm not back at this time, maybe hit up blah, blah, blah and see where I'm at. It's just keeping everyone in the know and knowing that if something were to happen to you and you were hurt out on a trailer to go missing, people know that something's up. It's not taking days of you not answering your phone for people to figure it out.
Right. So you're not actually alone. Like, I think people think of like solo travel and they're like, like you're on the moon or something like that. Like, you're never really alone, especially in today's, like, hyper-connected society. You're only as alone as you let yourself feel.
Yeah, I actually never feel alone.
Yeah.
Like, I always have someone to communicate with or to reach out to. Yeah.
Well, before we kind of move on to, like, our last little segment, is there anything that you want to kind of add that we haven't maybe discussed? And then also, would you kind of tell people where they can find you and how they can connect with you?
Yeah. I think what I want to add is, if anyone's interested in this lifestyle or just doing something different to, something alternative to the norm, and I say that because what is normal nowadays, but
quotations.
Yeah, quotations. I feel like most people are like, just do it, which yes, but like, don't allow yourself to always wonder what if. Just try it out, because even if, that's what I kept telling myself is, if I'm on the road for a month and I decide I flippin' hate doing this, I can go back to whatever I want to do. You have so many choices and you're never stuck with one choice. So just make the decisions and choices you need to set your life up for what you want, because in the end, like, your happiness is all that matters. And that, I think I'm like the most happy and the most comfortable in my life than I've ever been. Like we were talking about, happiness is my main priority. I could die 2 weeks from now, and so I want to live it up and do what I want to do. Yeah, so just make the small choices you need to reach your goals. But yeah, so you can find me. I'm on Instagram very often. I feel like that's kind of my home. It's Earth to Krissy. I share a lot about my 2 dogs. Yeah. And then I'm also on YouTube, which is Earth to Krissy, and I just kind of share my travels and kind of more vlog style and like what we're doing, and hoping to inspire others who want to live an alternative way to, you know, do that. So.
And I'll also add this because you didn't mention it, but I know graphic design is going to continue to be such a huge part of your life. You have an Instagram for graphic design.
Yeah, I do. Yep. It's Krissy Creative and then Design Studio. It'll pop up. It's also on my Earth to Krissy Instagram. But yeah, that's my goal with my design, is catering to people who share the same interests as I, and that really like jazzes me up to like work with people who I feel like are doing super cool things and have a lot of shared lifestyle things.
So everybody needs to go follow her. If you have an Instagram, you're missing out if you don't. And I really love your YouTube videos. Like, I'm not just saying that because you're my friend and I have to say that. I genuinely do.
You.
And it's been really cool seeing, like, even in the short amount of time that you've been doing it, already your personal, like, style and how you film is really starting to come out, and watching that evolution is super cool. So go subscribe to her YouTube as well. You will not be sorry. But before, go ahead.
This is a very decent human being that we endorse.
Aww,
yes,
thank you.
yes, we endorse Krissy.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys, because not only have you guys brought just more good people to my life, and you guys are constantly inspiring me, and, you know, I go to you guys for advice, but it was like, you guys are probably the main reason for me getting into the bus.
That's crazy
when
to
I
think
did.
about.
Dang,
Yeah.
I did not know that with anybody.
I kind of feel like this was like destined to happen with the way I like to live life, but you guys gave me almost like the okay that this can like happen, you know, like and then also, I mean, you are the main reason I started a YouTube as well.
I know,
so
I'm so
thankful
happy.
to you guys. My life is as great as it is now with you guys.
Let's hope it continues to be true. It's all downhill from here, folks.
It all hinges on how she goes from here. If it's bad, guess who's to blame?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead. You know, at the end of every single episode, we always like to end on a feel-good story. And, I mean, we started doing that because we did a couple of episodes that were kind of like downer topics, and this has not been a downer at all. But at this point, I feel like it's just kind of the theme that we've set, and I want to continue to just carry that forward. So you get to sit with us for our feel-good story.
I'm so happy.
So the story that I chose, if you've listened to our past feel-good stories, then you know we really like stories about like the human spirit and perseverance. Either that or like feel-good stories about animals. That's basically what we do. And I had heard the story loosely on a podcast that I was listening to, and I can't believe I've never heard it before because it's so inspiring and it has everything that I feel like people love. So I got this story off of the National World War II Museum website, and I will link this in the show notes. Also, I'll link your social media in the show notes.
Awesome.
I should have said that,
Thank you.
but anyway. And the headline says, Joe Louis, from boxing gloves to combat boots. So this is the story of the, I would say, American hero, Joe Louis, who I am ashamed to admit I knew nothing about up until like a couple of weeks ago. But now we'll all get to wise up. So this is a little bit lengthy, so just sit back and relax. Americans had many heroes during World War II. Some lay under white crosses on distant shores, others returned home wounded beyond recognition. Many more were average young men who answered their country's call. Some carried rifles, others loaded large naval guns or flew aircraft, but one of America's favorite heroes fought with his fists. When Joe Louis Barrow, known to America as Joe Louis, put on an army uniform in the early part of 1942, he wasn't just another young African American. He was boxing's world heavyweight champion, a title he had held since 1937. Born in Alabama in 1914, Louis was the seventh of 8 children born to Monroe and Lily Barrow. His father was a sharecropper who left when Louis was young. Louis's mother married a widower, and the family grew with the addition of his 6 children. With so many mouths to feed and fields to tend, Louis had very little formal education. He had been slow to develop, slow to talk and walk, and when he did, he spoke with a stutter. Louis was considered a quiet, good-natured child who did as he was told and never made trouble. He was, simply put, an unremarkable young man. Years of bad farming combined with rampant racism and escalating violence began to pull many African Americans away from the South and farming. In 1926, Louis and his family moved north to Detroit, where the two where the auto industry drew hundreds of thousands in search of better work. There, Louis attempted school, but by the 6th grade he was underperforming and was sent to a trade school, where he found the curriculum suited him better. Times were hard, and by age 15, Louis left school to help support his family. It was in those years that an amateur boxer friend convinced Louis to spar with him. It was the beginning of a historic career. Louis took to boxing quickly, and by mid-1934, after several years of learning not only how to fight but how to win, he was victorious in 50 out of 54 amateur fights with 43 knockouts. Louis was ready to go pro as heavyweight and did so on July 4, 1934, knocking out his opponent in the first round. His boxing career took off from there. Louis quickly became a hero to the African American community, and his handlers knew too well that a black fighter walked a thin line in 1930s America. Outspoken and flamboyant Jack Johnson, once the heavyweight champion, had pushed the line too far in his private life and had suffered for it. Louis was Johnson's opposite outside of the ring. He was naturally reserved, saying little and smiling even less, and black America came to love him as he brought them hope during the bleak days of the Depression. In 1936, Louis prepared to face his most famous opponent yet, German boxer Max Schmeling. Although he'd not yet fought for the heavyweight championship, Louis had fought several former champions and won. His fans were confident Schmeling would be the next victim of their beloved Brown Bomber. The event sold out Yankee Stadium, and all of America listened. The celebrations, which had erupted in Harlem and other African American neighborhoods in 1935, when Louis beat former champions Primo Carnera and Max Baer, were not heard that night. Louis and Schmeling went 12 rounds before the German boxer put Louis on the mat with a knockout. 1937 was a better year for Louis. He learned from his loss to Schmeling, trained harder, and on June 22nd, Louis faced the current heavyweight champion Jim Braddock. The fight lasted 8 rounds before Louis knocked Braddock out. Across America, black neighborhoods erupted in celebration. He was their hero, their champion, an example of what many of them felt they could be in a world of equality. For Louis, it was half a victory. Despite the magnitude of what being the heavyweight boxing champion meant, Louis wanted another shot at Max Schmeling. That chance came in 1938 with a rematch scheduled for Yankee Stadium on June 22nd. For millions, this was not just a boxing match, it was a literal fist fight of ideologies. A black American boxer against a friend of Hitler, an example of the so-called German master race. By 1938, tension was growing between the United States and Germany. The 1937 heavyweight championship between Schmeling and Braddock was canceled due to threats of boycott, and there was a fear that if the German boxer took home the championship, Louis would never get the chance to fight for it. Despite heavy propaganda against Schmeling portraying him as the epitome of Nazi evil, it was unbeknownst to the public that Schmeling had never joined the Nazi Party and had saved the lives of 2 Jewish teenagers during the Kristallnacht raids. The hype around the match grew as the date approached. Americans who had supported Schmeling in 1936 were swept up by the political wave washing over the match and turned against him. The match drew 70,000 to Yankee Stadium. An estimated 60 million Americans, nearly half of the population, tuned in via radio, along with over... is that 100 million? Worldwide. That's a lot of commas. The bell rang, the match began. 2 minutes and 4 seconds later, it was over. Louis had knocked Schmeling down 3 times before the referee declared a technical knockout and ended the match, fearful that any further blows would be fatal. Joe Louis was still the heavyweight championship. America went wild. Germany went silent. A testament to Louis' performance was silence in German media. The win was too definitive to be disputed. Riding the high of defending his heavyweight championship, Louis continued to box as the world sped toward war. In October 1940, Louis registered for the draft. He was eager to do his part for his country, and his first opportunity came the next year when his manager suggested he donate his earnings from his upcoming match to defend his champion title to the U.S. Navy Relief Society. Louis agreed and was met with backlash from a large part of the African American community. The U.S. Navy was the most staunchly segregated branch of the U.S. Armed Forces, and many felt betrayed that he would donate funds to an organization that relegated African Americans to servant roles as messmen and cooks. Louis was undeterred. No place else in the world could a one-time black cotton picker like me get to be a millionaire. I love this country like I love my people. The controversy ended before the match when Japanese forces attacked the U.S. fleet at Pearl Harbor. Americans were all in the war together, and Louis became an even greater hero. Louis won the match and donated $89,092 to the Navy Relief Society the day after he enlisted in the U.S. Army. Louis went to boot camp but was never destined for combat. His greatest value to the war effort was in his popularity. In time where few, if any, photos of black soldiers in uniform were printed, a poster of Louis became one of the most popular for war bond advertisements. Dressed in full combat gear, wielding a rifle with a fixed bayonet, the poster quoted a line from a speech Louis had given at a fundraiser. "We're going to do our part, and we'll win because we're on God's side." The slogan became wildly popular, boosting the idea that America was on the right side of the fight. The only fighting Louis would do would be in the ring. He defended his title again in March 1942, raising money for the Army Emergency Relief Fund. Although there was no desire amongst military and political leaders to integrate the armed forces, they understood the need to appeal to African Americans, and even more importantly, to portray America as a unified country against Nazi tyranny, regardless of what the truth at home was. To this end, Louis was given the role of goodwill ambassador. The Army formed a traveling group of black boxers which toured the United States and Europe. If he had an issue with an all-black boxing group, Louis never spoke up. He did, however, refuse to box in front of segregated audiences. The show was a hit, a mix of boxing and singing and dancing, courtesy of Sugar Ray Johnson. In 1943, the tour spent 100 days on the road in the United States. In 1944, Louis was in Europe entertaining troops and shaking the hands of wounded men from the Normandy campaign. In his book, Joe Louis, Randy Roberts explained the impact of Louis' visits to troops, quoting one GI who watched Louis perform and later wrote, "No movie star has been greeted by our fighting men with more enthusiasm than that displayed when the brown bomber got into action." When he visited the wounded troops, one GI, whose eyes had been seriously hurt in the fighting, asked the nurse to remove his bandages. "Let me have just one look at him," he pleaded. "I'll take my chance with my eyesight." Behind the scenes, Louis used the information gathered from talking to black troops to encourage positive changes. He even stepped in to help future baseball star Jackie Robinson when Robinson knocked out a white officer's front teeth. Robinson had stood up to the officer after he made racist remarks. Louis was able to intervene, keeping Robinson from being court-martialed or worse, and Robinson was allowed to continue officer candidate school. It was just another example of how Louis was considered a savior of African Americans during the war. He had the respect to stand up for his fellow man and the influence to make a difference. Louis' way of helping was in line with his personality. There was no loud speeches, no public displays, and no letters written. He would simply step in, ask a favor, or make a request himself. Louis is credited with helping to desegregate Army buses quietly and successfully. Despite his reserved personality, Louis appeared in several films during the war, including Irving Berlin's This Is the Army and The Negro Soldier. Made with the hope of soothing growing racial tensions in the United States, Louis was a central feature in the latter film. Highlighting his fight with Schmeling in 1938, it played up the war as a continuation of the fight between the two. Produced by Frank Capra, The Negro Soldier portrayed African Americans in a way rarely seen at the time, as patriotic and thoughtful and with more personal depth than most contemporary portrayals of African Americans. An Army film, it challenged segregation in the Army and in America. Louis was once again a champion for his people and his country. If America had liked Louis before the war, they loved him in 1945. Awarded the Legion of Merit, the citation read in part, "Staff Sergeant Barrow has entertained 2 million soldiers by frequent boxing exhibitions, which entailed considerable risk to his boxing future as a champion heavyweight of the world, but he willingly volunteered such action rather than disappoint the soldiers who desired to see him in the ring." Louis was discharged in 1945, a hero to many and ready to maintain his heavyweight title, which he did until his retirement in 1949. He returned for a few matches, but lost his final match to fellow Army veteran Rocky Marciano. The Brown Bomber retired for good, but remains one of America's most beloved boxers, a people's champion in hard times, and an example of a generation that rose up and overcame the challenges of the Great Depression and World War II.
Wow. That's kind of wild. I have actually seen and read that poster. The one that says, "We're going to do our part and we won because we're on God's side." I had no clue who that was. I thought it was just some Joe. Private Joe Lewis.
I mean, it says it on there, but like if you don't know anything about boxing, which I definitely don't, like that's not something I'm super into, it's not something you're going to know anything about. And the idea of, like it or not, like a lot of people have like a rosy perception of like the 40s and 50s and 60s, but in a lot of ways it was a really tough time for America, and there was a lot of racial tension. And the fact that he came to represent the American spirit, I think it really represents a turning point, and I think he's a hero in many, many ways. And the story really captivated me when I heard it, and I thought it'd be a good story to share just because it has so many of those elements that we love. And I had never heard it before, and I'm willing to bet a lot of people haven't heard it before.
Yeah, it's such an awesome story, and it's almost like saddening that we haven't even heard. Like,
I know.
It's not a popular story, and I feel like it should be. So
it's got everything it needs to be a movie. Like, it would be such a good movie.
Yeah.
That honestly, it reminds me a whole lot of in the Hollywood movie Pearl Harbor with Cuba Gooding Jr. and playing the black guy that is a cook on one of the ships in Pearl Harbor, Dory Miller. And yeah, that the Doris Miller in Pearl Harbor boxed. So this is...
Oh, it was like a testimony to him.
Yeah. Maybe it was a testimony. Maybe this is another guy that was very similar to that. But yeah, this was in that same era. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That is so neat.
That is really neat.
Maybe like an Easter egg. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So anyway, that is the story of Joe Louis, an American fighter in many, many ways, and just a really inspiring person. So before we leave it, we did kind of tease our crazy hike like yesterday. That was yesterday, but in many ways it feels like it was 10 years ago. So you want to kind of tell the story a little bit, Stuart?
Maybe I will. Do you want me to... Should I just read our review first, and then we can talk about it, or do you want to talk about it then I read the review?
I don't know that we need to read the review at all. We can just kind of summarize really quickly.
Okay.
Basically, nobody really knows about them. They don't get talked about. But there's a really impressive set of mountains in Idaho called the Seven Devils, and there's a really interesting Nez Perce legend attached to them that I won't get into now. It's just not the time, but it's interesting. And these mountains are impressive. Like, they are very prominent. They actually, the tallest peak is like the most, it's not the tallest peak in Idaho, but it's the most prominent, just because of how low the surrounding landscape is, and it hovers over Hell's Canyon, which is actually the deepest canyon in the United States. It's not the Grand Canyon, it's actually Hell's Canyon. So really interesting topography, really interesting landscape. As soon as we heard about it, we knew we wanted to spend some time there. But the problem is you have to wait until later on in the summer season because it stays snowed in to the point where you can't even like get up the roads to it. I want to say, how high is the elevation up there?
The top peak?
No, like the drive up.
The drive up, I think we started at about 72 to 7,300 feet, and that's a good 4,000 feet plus higher than we are where we're sitting.
So we were like, oh yeah, Krissy, let's go hike in the Seven Devils. Like, we have a hike and they told us it's open and it'll be fine. And we were going to do a trailhead called the He Devil Peak Trail. Yeah. And it's like a 6-mile in and out trail. And we were like, it should be fine. Like, it's rated as hard, but we're in really good shape and we'll be able to handle it. Well.
Well, I don't really know what to say other than, well, we didn't make it.
Let's just say, I feel like we tried so hard, and it was just...
Gosh, we did.
Undoable, but, like... And I told them, I'm like, we made it this far, this is already, like, beautiful views, and, like, I kind of got my fulfillment from the hike, so we shouldn't feel bad about turning around. But it was an experience.
Yeah. I normally get upset whenever I don't make it all the way to the peak of something, but I don't feel that way now because it was quite literally impossible. There was no trail. It was more like a general route that they would tell you to take. There was no
still so much snow.
Yeah.
Like,
so bad.
And it took us like 3 hours to go like 0.9 miles.
Yeah.
It was insane. And we got to a point where it was like, okay, to go any further would be tremendously unsafe. We need to go back, and it took us a good while to get back down too. So it was an interesting experience. It kind of goes to show that like these mountains do not mess around. Like, they live up to their name in every sense of the word. The Devils definitely beat us that day, and it was just crazy. So the Seven Devils Mountains in Idaho, if you've never heard of them, look them up. They are stunningly beautiful.
Don't go to them till August or something.
Yeah, but you really need to know what you're doing.
Yeah, and I feel like what was, cool but like crazy about the hike is there was a trail we were trying to follow. It wasn't there, but we were trying to follow, but it was more of, we were trying to find the safest way up and down. So we were going back and forth and going from the snow to the rocks to the trees to find like the most doable. We gave it our all. And it has awesome, looking at the map looks crazy.
We were all over the place.
Yeah, we were all over the place, but it was like awesome memories and we had so much fun.
We laughed a lot. A lot more than I thought we would, given how difficult it was.
Whenever the dogs can't follow you and they're like goats and they're like, I can't come up there, it's probably a really good sign that you are beyond what is completely safe. The only way we could have gone farther, it would be if you were a like legitimate professional and you had like cams wedged into rocks and you winched yourself up. There was no climbing. There were points where you slid like 50 feet. Krissy tried to stop you on the snow and y'all like stopped at the end of the snow, thankfully.
Yeah.
But then I slid like 100 feet and there was like a point of thinking, do I start trying to dig in? Do I flip, like you had said, Krissy? Do I hit this tree that's coming, or do I try and grab it when I'm next to it? And luckily, we all came out with relatively, very minor injuries. But it's very humbling to know that there are places that are not designed for humans to go at some point.
Yeah, it's really true. Nature is powerful and majestic and absolutely, at times, insurmountable. But to be up against that felt really, really neat.
Yeah.
So we've had some really cool experiences since you've been here visiting us, and we have so many pictures. At some point, they'll all get put up. But I'm really glad that we kind of got to share that with you. Like, that was our first time, and it was almost a little bit of a shit show, but it was still a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was such a good memory. I'll literally never forget.
Yeah, whenever the rocks come crashing down, I'm saying rocks, 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 and y'all are filming at the same time.
I'm just like,
fetal position.
Yeah, exactly.
So, anyway, we've had a lot of fun. We've made a lot of awesome memories, and I think I'm looking forward to just kind of the future, because I know we'll continue to kind of cross paths and intersect as we go along. So, anyway, I think that's where we're going to leave it for now. Thank you so much for being willing to do this. I kind of I asked you and I was like, I don't know if she'll want to.
Oh my gosh, no, I'm so glad you asked me. I was more than happy.
Talking is easy. And it's relatively unedited.
Yeah,
so
but it's
just a conversation.
Yeah, and being able to see you guys, kind of secondhand live through your experiences and be somewhat a part of your journey, and be able to see what you're doing, and then now join you in this. It's really special, and it's one more documentation of our memories together. So I was really 100%. Happy too, and I was glad you asked me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I think that's where we're gonna leave it for tonight. I can't think of anything else.
Other than
thank you so much for listening. Please rate and review. Please go check out Krissy. We love you guys.
I'm Stuart.
I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Krissy.
And this has been our ramble.